Welcome to Horror Shuffle.
Ah, yes. This is the Horror Shuffle, a podcast celebrating some of my favorite kinds of movies. My name is Ryan, like the character in the Friday the 13th TV series. Are there any other characters named Ryan in horror movies? I can't think of any. Damn it. Oh well. I'm here to talk about the 1987 movie Dolls, written by Ed Naha, who also wrote Troll, Chud 2, Bud the Chud, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And it was directed by Stuart Gordon, who also directed films such as Reanimator and From Beyond. All three of these movies, Dolls, Reanimator, and From Beyond, were among the VHS tapes that I would look at when I was in the horror section at our local movie rental place, Tape Deck. I still have not watched From Beyond. I watched Reanimator a few years ago, and Dolls I first watched when I was in college with some friends, and we loved it. It was so weird and goofy. It has some good lines, and the effects are fun and pretty good, especially for 1987. And but for the record, I'm not picky about effects, especially in older movies and especially horror movies, because I think studios would often cut budgets, and it would have an effect on, well, the effects. Like, big movie studios, I think, often have weird ways of handling things, like weird perceptions of audiences. Like, they'll look at the success of an animated film like Frozen, and they'll be like, we gotta get Kristen Bell, or kids love Kristen Bell. Or if Idina Menzel, who did the voice of Elsa, wasn't in Frozen 2, like, what kid is gonna be like, I don't want to see it, Idina Menzel isn't in it? And I mean, nothing, of course, against Kristen Bell or Idina Menzel. It's just the big Hollywood studios always seem to want who's popular at the time. So that's why it's cool that there are smaller independent film studios, like the one that made this, to make movies like Dolls, just low-budget fun. And how many major studios would cast Stephen Lee as the hero of a movie? He's the hero of this movie. And when I first saw Dolls, I thought, if I ever make a movie, I'm going to write a part for Stephen Lee. But I'll say more about him later. My point, and I guess advice, is if a movie has some corny effects or dialogue or even acting, just let it go. All right, let's get into the movie Dolls. So the movie starts with this music that reminds me of like a music box. And then we see that this is a Charles Band production. Now, Charles Band is known for a lot of low-budget movies like Puppet Master, Ghoulies, The Ginger Dead Man, Evil Bong. Just lots of low-budget movies. He's got like 422 titles listed on IMDb that he's like produced. Supposedly he's working on an actual Barbenheimer movie, like that combines Barbie and Oppenheimer. No idea exactly what it's about, but supposedly he's making a movie like that. During the titles for the movie, you see a bunch of doll faces kind of coming out from the shadows. And yes, some of these faces, they remind me of a doll that was at my grandma's house. It belonged to my aunt when she lived there, and I would usually sleep in that, like her old room, and that doll would be just sitting there. And thankfully I had never seen dolls, because I think I would have to like move that doll. But yeah, it was kind of a creepy doll. The main theme to the movie, which is what I said sounded like a music box, was done by a guy named Victor Spiegel, and the other music in the movie is done by a guy named Fuzzby Morse, which is kind of a cool name. The makeup effects in this movie were done by John Carl Buechler, who would direct the seventh Friday the 13th movie, and he also has done a lot of makeup effects in other movies. Like, I believe the fourth Nightmare on Elm Street movie and the fifth Halloween movie. So it's kind of cool. He actually worked on Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street. I wonder how many other people can say that. Sadly, he passed away back in 2019. Another person involved with the music in this movie is Charles Band's brother, Richard Band. He was the music producer, and he worked on a lot of his brother's movies, like Troll, which for that movie, he did a song called Cantos Profane, which is a song I'll often listen to while I'm cleaning up the bingo chips and cards after bingo at the nursing home where I work. And sometimes people will walk through and kind of give a funny look because it is a weird song. It kind of sounds like, I don't know, like, you know, weird chanting if you just hear it at certain parts. But it's a good tune. So the movie starts with two girls hitchhiking named Isabel and Enid, and a car comes by cruising past and knocks them into the ditch where, frankly, I have to say they kind of belong. Then we see the people in the car and are introduced to David Bauer, his daughter Judy. No, actually his wife's name is Rosemary. And right away you get the sense that you're not going to like Rosemary, and David seems okay at first. But, well, just wait. David is played by a guy named Ian Patrick Williams, who was in Reanimator and an episode of Gilmore Girls. I knew I recognized him, and I think where I know him from, other than this, of course, he played the father in the pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares. He plays like one of the parents who actually kills Freddy, which that's my favorite episode of the series. He also was in an episode of Seinfeld called The Wink, where he played a character named Stubbs. I think it's a pawn shop owner where Kramer brings this birthday card that's meant for George Steinbrenner to try to sell it because it's signed by all the Yankee players and everybody in the Yankee organization. But yeah, that's a good episode. Well, they're all good episodes. Rosemary is played by Carolyn Purdy Gordon, who actually is director Stuart Gordon's wife. She was in most of his movies. And Judy is played by Carrie Lorraine. She gave up acting when she was pretty young, and she became an attorney, I think actually a criminal lawyer. So a storm pops up, and they end up getting stuck. David gets out to push, but it's no use. David gets upset and starts swearing, and then Judy says, "Stop swearing! Mommy says it's not nice to swear." At one point he says, "I'm gonna kill that kid," to which Rosemary says, "Stand in line." So they see what appears to be a castle, and they start heading there on foot. Rosemary, for no good reason, throws Judy's teddy bear into the woods. Judy reminds me so much of my cousin's daughter that I hate seeing her go through some of the things that she goes through in this movie. Those two are just awful to her. We then get a scene where Judy imagines her teddy bear, suddenly, like 20 feet tall, walking out of the woods, shedding its cute and cuddly exterior and transforming into a monstrous bear with sharp teeth and claws. It viciously attacks Rosemary and David, and then looks back at Judy with blood all over its mouth and fur and claws, and Judy says, "Oh, Teddy," and the bear just shrugs as if saying, "Oops, sorry." Judy is then snapped out of her fantasy as Rosemary slaps the back of her head. They get to the big house or castle or mansion, I guess, and they assume no one is there, and they enter through an opening that leads into the basement. There, Judy sees a quick flash of a small dark face with glowing eyes. She gets scared, and her father falls, knocking stuff over, and then an elderly man appears with a shotgun. and is soon joined by his wife, and we meet Gabriel and Hillary, the owners of this house. Gabriel tells them that as much as they love visitors, they prefer people use the front door. So Judy explains that they tried the front door, but it was locked and they were awfully wet. So Gabriel and Hillary invite them inside to warm up. So now Gabriel and Hillary are played by Guy Rolfe and Hillary Mason. Guy Rolfe was in a bunch of the Puppet Master movies. Well, I mean, 3 of them. And so he worked a lot with Charles Band. And Hillary Mason was in, well, a lot of things, but one thing, she was in a movie called Don't Look Now, which I actually added to the list for this podcast because it sounds good. One interesting fact about Guy Rolfe is he is a descendant of John Rolfe, who was the husband of Pocahontas, the real husband, which, of course, was also a movie in 1995, a Disney animated film, which was probably popular because Mel Gibson was in it. In fact, actor Sean Bean was considered for the role of Captain John Smith, but Disney felt they needed an actor well known in America. So, yeah, there you go. Anyway, Gabriel and Hillary lead them through the house, and Judy sees a room full of old toys and dolls, and as she leaves, a doll's head blinks and then smiles a really creepy smile. Judy doesn't see it, though, because she has turned around. She hears laughter from behind a different door, and Gabriel asks her what's the matter, and she says,
"Just my imagination."
So they end up going to the elderly couple's kitchen, and Hillary fixes them some kind of soup, which I found out listening to the commentary, it was pea soup. And in the commentary, Carrie Lorraine, who played Judy, said that the soup was awful. And Carolyn Purdy Gordon, who played Rosemary, said that she didn't think it was that bad. Well, according to Carolyn Purdy Gordon's IMDb trivia, she did a lot of the catering for her husband's films. So I wonder if, that's a little awkward. I wonder if she made the soup. But, I mean, then again, Carrie Lorraine was only 7 years old when this was made, and it's pea soup. I don't care for pea soup still, so I think it was a fair comment. And speaking of comments, Gabriel makes a comment about it being the longest night in the world as he's talking about the storm, and says the weather brings out creativity and helps him with his work. Rosemary says, "What kind of work is that? Witchcraft?" And Gabriel and Hillary laugh. Gabriel then reveals that he is a doll maker and that he makes the most wonderful toys. He gives Judy a doll made up like a court jester and says his name is Mr. Punch. And, of course, that Punch's partner's name is Judy, just like her. So it's perfect. Punch and Judy. Suddenly, the door opens and Isabel, one of the hitchhikers from earlier, enters, announcing that she feels like shit.
Stop swearing! Mommy says it's not nice to swear.
The other hitchhiker, Enid, follows. Enid is played by Cassie Stewart, and Isabel is played by Bunty Bailey. Bunty Bailey is actually the girl in the Aha video, Take On Me. She was actually dating the lead singer at the time, so they were a real couple. Enid's and Isabel's outfits were heavily inspired by Madonna, which is pretty obvious. Enid even wears a boy toy belt that Madonna used to often wear. Actually, this reminds me of when I was in high school, like 15 or 16, I was dating this girl who, she lived in a different town, and we met at the local mall one day, and I noticed she was wearing a belt that said, "I love my man" on it, and like my first thought was like, there's no way that's referring to me, because it didn't make any sense. We lived like 30 miles from each other, and we hardly saw each other. So yeah, it was that was my first relationship, and yeah, we broke up shortly after that. But yeah, I'm sure she was dating somebody else closer to town. We were like 15, 16. So if I had to guess, she probably wanted to break up with me there, but she was really nice and probably couldn't go through with it then. But yeah, shortly after we did. Anyway. So yeah, Enid and Isabel enter, and then they're followed by Ralph, played by Stephen Lee. As I said, I love Stephen Lee in this movie. He's just a big goofball, and I've always enjoyed seeing him like pop up in things like he's in the very first episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. I didn't even recognize him, but in La Bamba he played the Big Bopper. He was also in an episode of The Golden Girls where they go on vacation, and he's in an episode of Seinfeld where he plays a contractor who redesigns Jerry's apartment and then George's desk at work so that he can nap under his desk. He's also in an episode of CSI where actually the ending of that episode, it always kind of gets me teary-eyed. It's one of my favorites. He played Tom Arnold in a TV movie about Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold. And yeah, he has a lot of TV credits. And as I said earlier, I always thought if I made a movie, I would put him in it. In the commentary for this movie, he said one thing he really enjoyed doing when this movie came out is he would call the movie theater and ask what was playing just so he could hear them say, 7 o'clock Dolls starring Stephen Lee. He said he had his mom call and like different family members call just to hear them say starring Stephen Lee. So yeah, we find out that Ralph picked up Enid and Isabel because he's a nice guy, but then of course they try implying that the reason he picked them up was because he fancied them. And then later they reveal that they're intending to take his wallet and like steal from him. Gabriel invites them all to stay and shows them to their rooms for the night. David and Rosemary get their own room. Judy gets her own room. Enid and Isabel get a room, and Ralph gets his own room as well. Enid and Isabel, reveal that they're going to steal Ralph's wallet, and Isabel shoves some dolls out of the way off of a mantle and onto the floor to set up a boombox. I'm sure that won't come back to bite her in the ass.
Stop swearing! Mommy says it's not nice to swear.
I know, I'm sorry. Isabel also mentions stealing his car keys, and presumably his car, I guess. Then we see the eyes move on one of the dolls. Gabriel shows Judy and Ralph his workshop, and Ralph is downplaying his interest in the toys, still a kid at heart. Gabriel tells him that his toys still remember him and says,
"Toys are very loyal, and that is a fact."
So then we cut to Isabel and Enid's room, and Hillary is in there, and Isabel asks if there's anything in the house that's valuable, which you might as well just say, "Hey, we're gonna steal some stuff." By now, if not immediately, Hillary and Gabriel have them all pegged. Although Enid has some reservations about stealing from them, she's like, they could be our grandparents. And Gabriel then shows Judy to her room and wishes her a good night. David and Rosemary make plans to ship Judy back to Boston with her mother, and David, her father, refers to her as an anchor. Now, some people might find the unlikability of these characters is a bit over the top, but I don't know, I find it funny. It's different from, say, like the characters in Friday the 13th, which was, the previous episode of this podcast, and pretty much all of the characters in that movie are likable. And, bad stuff happens to them. Even in the Twilight Zone, which I think sometimes people assume bad things happen to people in the show, because of something they do. But no, not always. Watch the Time Enough at Last episode with Burgess Meredith. So, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's nice to see people get what's coming to them, so to speak. So then we see Judy reading Hansel and Gretel, and I never noticed this before when I watched this, but earlier when Hillary gave Judy the soup, the awful soup, and told her that it'll put some meat on her bones, she pinches Judy's finger. Then, as she's reading Hansel and Gretel, she reads that the witch would pinch Hansel's finger to see how plump he is, because, she's trying to fatten him up. Then Judy pinches her own finger, obviously remembering when Hillary did it, and it makes you wonder about the old couple's motives. So Isabel, having left their room to explore, finds something to stick in her purse. A pair of dolls move their eyes to watch her, and she checks out a music box playing, and it's the same music played at the start of the film, so yeah, it really was like a music box music. She closes it, and as she walks away, we get an awesome close shot of a doll's face. The doll's eyes are like bloodshot, like she's got conjunctivitis, and a sinister, creepy smile forms. The effects of the dolls are really cool, especially for 1986, when this was made. I mean, that's nearly 40 years ago. The guy who did a lot of these effects, or maybe all of these effects, his name is David Allen, and I guess he actually did the effects of like the Pillsbury Doughboy, at least at some point. So that's kind of funny. I wish the Pillsbury Doughboy was in this. Okay, so the music box starts playing again, and the dolls are suddenly gone. So Isabel recloses the music box, goes to the doorway to look out in the hall. The music box starts playing again, and suddenly she's pulled down to the floor and dragged down the hall, and then slammed head first, well, actually face first, into a wall. And then she's left lying on the floor. Judy and Mr. Punch find her as they have gotten up to get something to drink. Judy reaches out her hand to take Isabel's outreached hand, but Isabel is dragged away again. And for this scene, because Bunty Bailey was covered in blood, Carrie Lorraine watched them put the makeup on her so that she wouldn't be scared. So that was kind of cool. Then we get another great parenting scene as Judy runs to David and Rosemary's room to tell them that the elves got one of the girls. They don't believe her, of course, and David raises his hand as if to slap her. Rosemary stops him only because he'll end up paying more child support. Judy then goes to Ralph's room and wakes him up by grabbing his big toe. Now, in the commentary, Stuart Gordon said that it was actually him and his daughter who did that scene. Ralph gets up all startled and says, "You just about gave me a heart attack." And that statement hits hard because Stephen Lee actually did die of a heart attack in 2014 when he was only 58. Judy tells him what she saw, and he also dismisses it, but much more politely than her father. Then he notices blood on her slippers as she's walking away, so they go out to look for clues, like in true Scooby-Doo fashion. Ralph, and it's funny because Ralph is a little more scared than Judy. They follow a trail of blood into the attic, and as they're looking at something, Isabel slowly becomes visible in like the shadowy background, which is reminiscent of the scene in Halloween when Michael Myers' face suddenly appears. Lightning flashes, and we see her even clearer. She appears to have sort of turned into a doll. She squirms, but they don't see her. According to the commentary, they said Carolyn Purdy Gordon actually played Isabel in this scene because Bunty Bailey was gone by this point. As they're leaving, Ralph trips on some dolls that were on the top of the stairs, and they wake up David and Rosemary and eventually Enid, but nobody believes them. And in fact, Enid thinks that Ralph killed Isabel. David insists that Judy sleep in their room, but she runs away, and her father threatens to rip Mr. Punch apart and tries to do so, but isn't successful. There's a cool reverse shot where he drops Mr. Punch, and Mr. Punch flips up onto a chair as if sitting on it. And the reason that he dropped Mr. Punch is because Mr. Punch bites him. He then takes a candle and tries burning Mr. Punch's face, but stops when melted rubber or plastic drips on his foot. He drops Mr. Punch again, grabs a candle again, but Mr. Punch is gone. Next, Gabriel tells Ralph that he spilled paint, and that is what was in the hall, not blood. Enid paces back and forth, trying to decide what to do. Suddenly, the boombox stops playing as it crashes on the floor, and we see a bunch of dolls sitting where the boombox was. Then we cut back to Ralph, and he wipes blood off his leg because he says something bit him, and then says, "With my luck, they're rabid." And Judy replies,
I like rabbits.
Judy asks what they should do about the longest night in the world, and Ralph says, "Honey, I wish I knew what you were talking about." Mr. Punch, who Judy found on the chair next to them, speaks and says, "You know, Ralph, deep down inside, you know." So now I feel like the movie is trying to make you think that something is about to happen to Enid or David, or maybe even Ralph, but we cut to Rosemary. She's in bed, and she sees things moving under the covers. She lifts up the covers, and we see a bunch of dolls holding little knives. What do you call a group of dolls? Like, you have a, murder of crows, which actually that seems appropriate, a bed of oysters, parliament of owls, crash of rhinos, shrewdness of apes. So maybe for dolls, how about a provocation of dolls? That has a nice ring to it. Anyway, the dolls just attack Rosemary. They're stabbing her, biting her. They take a nice chunk out of one of her arms. One doll hits her in the head with a hammer. Another doll starts sawing at her arm with a little handsaw. And another pair of dolls start sawing into her leg with a coping saw, which I would describe as like a cute hacksaw? I don't know. She then finds herself surrounded by, what did I say? Oh yes, the provocation of dolls. And to get away from them, she leaps out a window, and we assume she dies. But it's a great shot. It's a cool stunt. She actually jumped out of the window herself, and a man did play her, I think, in the scene before she jumped out the window, which was surprising. But yeah, it's a cool shot. It reminds me of Friday the 13th Part 4 when Trish jumps out the window, and of course Gordon the dog also, which that's still confusing to me. But anyway, Enid goes up to the attic where she sees this Iron Maiden, the torture device, not the band, and the wooden chair or throne where Isabel was earlier, which also looks like a device for torture. But yeah, Isabel isn't in that anymore, and you can see blood on it. Enid then finds Isabel all dolled up. Her eyes fall out onto the floor, and she picks them up and holds them up like the doll on the poster for this movie. Then, a doll dressed like a cowboy lassos Enid, but she sets the doll on fire, and more dolls attack, so she starts stomping on them, and then we see underneath the dolls' faces is a dark, grotesque, corpse-like interior body. She breaks more dolls with her boy toy belt, runs downstairs, and is confronted by a troop of toy soldiers, and wrongly underestimates their threat, and they fire their little guns, which leave big bloody exit wounds in her back. They fire again, and you see some nice squib work, which, FYI, a squib is like a little controlled explosion to simulate bullet wounds. If you've ever seen RoboCop, there's a great example of squibs in that movie. Ralph and Judy enter a room with dolls. Ralph bumps his head, and we get another shaking light, like in Friday the 13th and Psycho. The room is full of dolls. And after a while, Ralph is like, "These dolls are alive, aren't they?" He sees that they're blocking the door and starts attacking them. Judy yells for him to stop and that he's making them angry. Then the dolls attack Ralph, but Judy yells at the dolls.
Why are you doing this to my friend?
And they stop, and they wait to see what the dolls decide to do with them. David then tries to get intimate with Rosemary, but discovers that she's dead or near dead. And she does seem to try to grab onto him, but I feel it could be like the scene in Ed Wood where Bela Lugosi acts like the octopus is attacking him. Not that it looks bad, but that's just what it reminded me of. Or also in Drag Me to Hell when the main character falls in that pit and the old woman's corpse seems to be almost like it's attacking her, or just it keeps ending up on her. But yeah, again, we only get a quick shot, but the makeup effects of Rosemary looks really cool. Like one of her eyes is hanging out, and yeah, they show it so quick that even I tried to pause it a few times and I kept missing it. So then Ralph and Judy are set free by the dolls, and then David attacks Ralph because he thinks Ralph killed Rosemary. Mr. Punch saves Ralph by throwing an ice pick or screwdriver or something at him. David ends up smashing Mr. Punch with a sledgehammer and screaming, "Fuck you, Cody!" Gabriel and Hillary enter and chastise his use of language and temper. David calls Hillary an old witch, and Hillary says, "He figured it out." Although they could have said the same thing near the beginning at the dinner table when Rosemary made a comment about Gabriel's work being witchcraft. Anyway, David notices Judy is gone and demands Gabriel and Hillary tell him where she is. Gabriel tells him that being a parent is a privilege, not a right. David then starts morphing into Mr. Punch, eventually shrinking down to size, effectively replacing the Mr. Punch he destroyed. Ralph and Judy awake the next morning, and Gabriel explains that Judy's father and Rosemary have gone on without her, reading a note that her father supposedly wrote saying he was never a good father and she'll be much happier with her mom. And also they're moving to another country and changing their names. Ralph asks about Enid and Isabel, and Gabriel says,
Yes. P.S. I'm taking the two hitchhikers with me.
Ralph tries to take the note and read it for himself, but Gabriel tosses it in the fire and it ignites immediately. He tells Ralph Judy's father asked that he take Judy to Boston and that he left money for plane tickets. Now, before they leave, Judy wants to say goodbye to Mr. Punch, and Mr. Punch says in her father's voice, "So long, short stuff." So Ralph, I think, is pretty certain that this night, the longest night in the world, was not a dream and wants to get the hell out of there. So they head to Ralph's car where they find Judy's teddy bear, and Judy takes the teddy bear and gives it to Gabriel and Hillary, saying that she thinks that Teddy will be happier there. Then, as Ralph and Judy drive away, Judy asks Ralph if he's married, if he'd like to be, if he's ever been to Boston, tells him that he will like her mother, and asks if he's ever wanted a daughter. We then get a shot of 4 dolls that look like Isabel, Enid, Rosemary, and David. And the David slash Mr. Punch doll and Rosemary look at each other and start shaking, I guess out of anger or frustration. The movie then ends with another vehicle getting stuck near the house and clearly dysfunctional, like Judy's family. And an adult couple with 2 kids get out of the car, start walking up towards the house, and so obviously it's gonna continue with this family, probably the same kind of thing. In a commentary, Stuart Gordon said that the guy that gets out of this vehicle was the gym teacher at the school that his kids were attending while they were filming in Italy. And yes, I don't think I said that. Yes, this film was made in Italy. In the commentary, they said that while they were filming, they celebrated Thanksgiving and actually had a Thanksgiving dinner. And in the scene where Ralph and Judy wake up David and Rosemary and Enid, they had just eaten, so nobody really wanted to work, because I'm sure they were all stuffed and probably had a little bit of a hard time shooting those scenes. There was supposed to be a sequel to this movie where Ralph does marry Judy's mother, and then Judy receives in the mail 2 dolls that look like Gabriel and Hillary. So then I would imagine some weird stuff starts to happen there. Of course, the sequel never came to be. In the commentary, they mentioned that the house, Hartwick Manor, was not as big as it looked, and they used camera angles to make it look bigger. And I think Carrie Lorraine, who played Judy, said that she was actually taller than the front door. I'm not sure, because I mean the house does look big, like when they're walking up to it. So maybe it was just in certain shots it was a different set or something. The interior of the house was also built specifically for this movie, and it looks really cool. I can't imagine doing that. I'm sure it's a lot of fun, though. Another thing in the commentary, Stephen Lee revealed that when he was a kid, he had an invisible friend that lived under his bed, and he would leave food out for it. And speaking of invisible friends or make-believe friends, when I was a kid, I actually had make-believe friends myself, and they were actually bears, not like the killer teddy bear in this movie. They were different colored bears, and they had different jobs based on their colors. Like, one bear was a blue bear, and he was a police officer. Another bear was red, and he was a firefighter. And I don't remember the rest of them, but yeah, I had different colored bears that had different jobs, and I used to talk to them. I remember pretending to talk to one on the school bus. It was probably in kindergarten, or it might have been 10th grade too, possibly, but I'm not sure. But yeah, I totally had pretend friends. All right, so just a few more thoughts and things. So Judy, the part of Judy, a bunch of other kids auditioned for the part, and it always reminds me of when I read about Mason Gamble, the kid who ended up getting the part of Dennis the Menace in that movie with Walter Matthau. I always think I could never be a person solely responsible for casting a movie, because I'd never be able to turn people down, especially like for Judy's role in this one, like having to tell a bunch of kids they didn't get the part. The script would end up changing, and it'd be like, on a stormy night, 4 school buses full of children and teachers get stranded at an old mansion, and then the pot of awful pea soup would end up getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I'm glad I don't have that position. So one of the things that I like is anagrams of things, like I did in the last episode with Camp Crystal Lake. If you rearrange the letters, you can get C. Pamela Cry Stalk, using the letter C as C. And so for this one, I've just found a couple of interesting ones. If you rearrange the letters in Gabriel Hartwick's name, you get Witch-like Barrage, which I thought is appropriate and kind of fun. And also, Carolyn Purdy Gordon, if you rearrange her letters, you get Corrody Playground. So, and I mean that's the actor's name, but yeah, I mean the character of Rosemary. That's a kind of a fitting description, a Corrody Playground. So, I have 7 questions that I want to ask, and I plan on doing this at the end of each episode, like I did in the previous one. So, the first question is, what character would you want to play and be cast as? Like which one would I likely be cast as and also want to play? So, I think it's obvious in this one, it would be Ralph, because I'm a kid at heart. I still buy Ninja Turtle action figures from time to time. Like, years ago, I found a Bebop and Rat King action figures at a St. Vincent de Paul store. That was like, yeah, 13 years ago. But then I hit the jackpot at a nearby antique store where I found Ace Duck, Wingnut, the Turtle Cycle, the Turtle Chopper, 2 General Trags, and also a second Usagi Yojimbo, he's like a samurai rabbit.
I like rabbits.
And I also bought a reissued Crane last year at Walmart, which is just sitting kind of near me now. My box of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures is actually, if I look under the table, I can see him. I can see Baxter Stockman. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I still I still kind of mess around with them a little bit, like sort of like just looking at them and reminiscing. Um, okay, the next question is, what is your favorite line? And I think my favorite line is when Judy gets Ralph to look for Isabel after she saw her like get like attacked by the dolls, or like all bloody, and they're out in the hall, and Judy says, I think it was around here, and then Ralph says, you're not sure? And then Judy says, what do you want from me? I'm 7 years old. I think that's my favorite line. So the next question is, what is your favorite gag? And I think I have to go with when David first comes to it's right after Rosemary's death. David tries to go into bed and get intimate with her, but then I guess he smells her, and because she's dead, she must smell, and so he thinks it's him, or maybe it is him, I don't know. For whatever the case, he decides to take a shower, but while he's doing this, Rosemary's covered, she's in bed and she's covered with a sheet, and there's a little spot of blood that forms at near the beginning of the scene, and it starts getting bigger and bigger as the scene goes on, but David can't see it because he's on the other side of the bed. So I don't know, that's just kind of a funny gag in a sick, twisted way. Now, what is your favorite kill? That's a tough one because I think it's between Enid's death by the toy soldiers, because it's unexpected, because I guess I think when I first watched it and I saw that they were getting ready to shoot her, I thought that, of course they were gonna result in these tiny little bullet holes, and then she was gonna die some other way. But yeah, it turns out to be, like a normal sized gunshot. Normal sized gunshot. I don't know if that sounds stupid or not. Well, I'd probably sound stupid throughout this whole thing, so what do I care? But I don't know. I guess I have to go with Rosemary's Death because it's really when you first see the dolls in action, like creeping up under the covers on her bed, and then they just attack her in so many different ways with the saws and the hammer and just biting her arm. So and then of course her death when she jumps out the window too is cool. So yeah, I think I have to go with Rosemary. Next question. What prop would you like to own? So what prop from this movie? That's that's tough. I was thinking maybe the Mr. Punch doll in David's pajamas, but actually I don't think you could have just one of those dolls. I think it would have to be the collection of dolls at the end of David, Rosemary, Isabel, Enid. Yeah, I think I would want all four of those dolls sitting on a shelf. Maybe I'd put Leonardo there or Michelangelo there just to kind of keep them in check. And the next question, which character should get a spin-off series or film? Um, I was gonna say Gabriel and Hillary, but actually, I think Mr. Punch. I think maybe he could like travel from one family to the next, or one like family or person, kind of, and he could like travel around, kind of like the Incredible Hulk, or the guy in the USA series, or was it Fox, the Werewolf series from like the 1987, I think, which was an awesome series. Yeah, something like that, and could just encounter like solve like problems, but there could be a horror element to it. Yeah. Okay, and the last question, who would be cast in a remake? Like between one and three characters, I usually do. So I was thinking for Gabriel's, the character of Gabriel, um, that he was Guy Rolfe was about 75 or 76 when he did the role. So I looked at people who were born, that who are that age now, and I came up with a few interesting ones. Alice Cooper, that would be kind of fun. Um, John Carpenter, that would be appropriate and cool. But I think I would have to go with Michael DeBar. And Michael DeBar, most people would know him as MacGyver's arch nemesis, Murdoch, on the 1980s version of MacGyver. Although he was also in a couple episodes of the remake of MacGyver, where he played a different character. Yeah, Michael DeBar, he's a cool guy. He's also a musician. He in fact was actually approached to take over for Freddie Mercury when he died to front Queen, but he declined because he didn't feel he could take his place or was up to it. Michael DeBar was also in Ghoulies. He was like the bad guy in Ghoulies. He plays Maitre D in the episode of Seinfeld with the smelly car. He's the guy that Jerry gets to go into his car and won't let him out until he admits that it still smells. Yeah, he's been in a lot of things, including a cameo video for my son's birthday a few years ago, because my son and I are big MacGyver fans. So yeah, he actually wished my son a happy birthday. All right, so for Hillary's character, I thought Kathleen Quinlan, because she's about the same age that Hillary Mason was for the role of Hillary. So Kathleen Quinlan, you would know her from the Twilight Zone movie in the segment where she plays the teacher or the woman. I can't remember if she actually plays a teacher in that movie, or I know the character's name is Helen Foley, and she's named after one of Rod Serling's favorite teachers. But anyway, she's in that segment where she hits the little boy Anthony on the bike and then goes to his house, and it's like the remake of the It's a Good Life Twilight Zone episode with Billy Mooney. She was also in the movie Breakdown. She played Kurt Russell's wife, and she gets kidnapped. Which is a great movie. She was also in the Hills Have Eyes remake, where she played the mother of the family. Also, Jenny Agutter, who plays the nurse and love interest of David in American Werewolf in London. I feel like she would be good, but I think the perfect person would be Carol Kane, who, if you don't know Carol Kane, she's been in a lot of things, including an episode of Seinfeld. The episode where Elaine throws her electronic organizer out of this limo and it hits her in the head. Ryan here with a quick correction. It was actually the Russian writer that was in the limo with her that threw the organizer out the window, not Elaine. So, no angry emails, please. All right, back to the episode. But she was also in When a Stranger Calls. She's been in so many things. She's in a episode of Tales from the Dark Side. She was in the Gotham show. She played Penguin's mother. Edna, is it Edna Cobblepot? I don't know if I'm mixing up Edna Krabappel from Simpsons or not, but anyway, yeah, she's been in a lot of things. She would be awesome in this role. In the Tales from the Crypt or Tales from the Dark Side episode, she actually played a witch, so that would be perfect. So yeah, I think that's about it for the questions. So, before I end this episode, I have a special guest who was supposed to be in this movie, but had to back out due to scheduling conflicts. You know her from her breakout role in the 1963 Season 5 episode of The Twilight Zone entitled Living Doll. And, well, instead of introducing you, I think you ought to introduce yourself, since it's kind of your catchphrase.
My name is Talky Tina.
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course, yes. So, well, let's get this out of the way. The common misnomer that a lot of people mistakenly refer to you as Talking Tina, when it's actually Talky Tina, Talky.
Yes, I get that all the time. I remember one time Sylvester Stallone called me Talking Tina, so I told him I really liked his movie Rocking.
What did he say?
I don't know if he got it, but Burt Young laughed and spit out his ginger ale.
Did you ever think of changing your name?
Oh, for a while in the late 1960s, I went by Moonbeam Tina.
Really?
I dated Wavy Gravy.
Oh, wow. I can hear a bunch of listeners Googling that name. Anyway, so you were supposed to be in this movie, the movie Dolls, but ended up dropping out due to prior commitments. So what happened?
Well, I was working on the Masters of the Universe movie, and production was running behind. I was supposed to be the doll that hits the wife with the hammer.
Oh, yeah, you would have been good in that. So what was it like working on Masters of the Universe?
Let's just say I wish I would have been in dolls instead.
All right. Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't really have any other questions. I wish I had prepared more, but, anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug?
I'm working on something with Rainn Wilson and Amy Schumer, but I can't really say anything about it yet.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'll look forward to seeing that. Now, before you go, could I have you say another line from your Twilight Zone episode?
My name is Talky Tina, and I'm going to kill you.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you for doing this. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Well, that just about does it for this episode on the movie Dolls. Again, I just love this movie. I remember the first time I watched it, I think it was with my friend Clayton and friend and former neighbor Christy and my friend Green Bear, the gardener. I mean, anyway, the only thing I have left to do is to pick a movie for my next episode. So I have a list of a 7-page list of movies in like a Word document. So I'm going to roll an 8-sided die. Oh, and since the last time I did this, because there are so many Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Streets, and Halloween movies, I actually added those 3 movies to each page. I mean, unless, except for the page that, like, Friday the 13th was already on. That way there's not 2 Friday the 13th. But each page has a Friday the 13th, Halloween, and Nightmare on Elm Street. Just because, those are, like, the most popular. So, at least for now, once the list starts getting to where there's not as many movies, then I'll probably take them off. But I don't want to do, like, I don't want it to be like a year or so before I do any of those movies, because I'm anxious to get to those. But yeah, so just for now, I did that. So all right, I'm gonna roll my 8-sided die. All right, and I rolled a 7, so that means I'm on page 7. So it'll be a movie between the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and X-Ray. X-Ray, that's a low budget slasher movie that I watched for the first time this past year. And there's a lot of other good ones in here. The Thing, They Live, Tremors, Twilight Zone the movie, Trilogy of Terror, Us. Yeah, a lot of good ones. All right, so now I'm going to roll my 8-sided die again. And if I roll an even number, then I'm going to count down from the top. If I roll an odd number, I'm going to count up from the bottom. Shit. It went on the floor, so I'm going to re-roll. That's probably going to happen every time. Okay, I rolled a 3, so it's an odd number, so I'm going to start from the bottom. Now I'm going to roll the 30-sided die. Number 6. All right, so I'm going to count up from the bottom. X-Ray, X, Wrong Turn, Nightmare on Elm Street, Wolfen, Wolf. All right, so that means my next movie is going to be Wolf. That's the one with Jack Nicholson from 1990 something, mid 90s, where he plays like a wolf man basically. Yeah, that's a fun movie. I've seen that a number of times. Be fun to watch again. As of this recording, the movie Wolf appears to be free on Tubi. Tubi TV. Gotta give it to Tubi. A lot of good stuff on there. I watched it not too long ago with my son, I think. But yeah, so that will be the next episode. So yeah, come back for that. Thank you for listening. Again, email me at horrorshufflepod@gmail.com. And yes, thank you. And I'll be right back. She finds a pair of dolls. No. Fuck you, stupid fucker. I know, stop swearing. But ended up dropping out due to prior commitments. So what happened?
Well, at that time, I was helping Billy Joel write We Didn't Start the Fire. That's none of your fucking business. Einstein, James Dean, Brooklyn's got a winning team, Davy Crockett, Peter Pan, Elvis Presley, Disneyland, Bardo, Budapest, Alabama, Khrushchev, Princess Grace, Peyton plays Trouble in the Suez.